Welcome to the Witching Hour. I'm Frank.
And I am Helena Domenic.
So you are the author of An Illuminated Guide to Wicca. So I want to ask, what got you started in Wicca?
So I was raised Roman Catholic, and but I was always really interested in the more mystical side of things, a lot of which the church really is not crazy about, as you probably know. And but there was always something there, and I sort of would dip my toe in and then pull back and dip it back in. And when I was in college, my dad, of all people, brought home a book by Erica Jong called Witches, which was like a big coffee table style book with really beautiful illustrations in it. And for those of you who don't know Erica Jong, she was well known in the 70s, like a sexy lady writer and also a poet. And so she had poems about witches, both in ancient times and modern times. And she mentioned a book called Drawing Down the Moon, and I was like, I need to know more about this. So I went and sought out that book, and I was going to school at Kutztown University in Pennsylvania, but I lived in Delaware, and I thought, well, nobody from Delaware isn't going to be into this. This is crazy. But I read Drawing Down the Moon and was like, aha, that's what I am, okay. And then I went home to Delaware and walked into a friend's bookstore and found out that he had a copy of Drawing Down the Moon.
That's awesome.
And I was like, aha, so you're into this? And he was like, yes, I am. I was like, do you know people? And he said, yes, I do. And so basically he hooked me up when I found my first coven, which eventually grew into the Assembly of the Sacred Wheel. Basically, I love Wicca because it does all the things that I love spiritually. It celebrates the earth and brings women into divinity, which I love. That was very important to me, and lots of other things. So, does that answer your question?
Definitely.
Okay,
definitely.
good.
So obviously my next question is, out of the Sabbaths, what is the one you look forward to the most?
Oh, I'll show you the picture, is in bulk, which means in the belly, and it's also sometimes known as Bridget.
That's auntie.
And yeah, and you know, she's a very, there we go, there's, it's a time of light, even though it takes place in February 1st or 2nd generally. And you know, you would think February is like the cold, up near me, it's usually like the death cold month of the year. But underneath, or you know, in the belly, in the ground, all the little seeds are shooting up their little shoots, and you know, all the creatures are getting ready to give birth to their, you know, lambs and kitties and puppies and all of them. And so it's a celebration of the fact that light is coming back. And I just love that. I think it's, we always do a ritual that is very focused on light and candles, and it's very beautiful, so that really appeals to me. And I love the goddess Bridget too. She's Irish.
Yep.
And you know, is Saint Bridget is often seen as, you know, the Christians couldn't make them stop worshiping Bridget, so they made her a saint.
Yep.
You know, so that's probably my favorite. I love them all, but that's probably my favorite one out of all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, another question I love to ask fellow Wiccans, because I'm also a Wiccan practitioner also. Are you an elemental Wiccan? Are you eclectic? Or
Okay. I would call myself eclectic. Again, the tradition that I came from is a little bit more into ceremonial magic than most paths are that you might find, and so I've got a lot of that in me. But I love the Celts, I love the Egyptians, I love the Norse gods and goddesses, and I consider myself, I guess, more of an art witch because a lot of my magic kind of manifests through the art that I do.
hashtag art witch realness.
Yeah, art witch realness, yeah. So, yeah.
That is awesome. That's wicked. Okay, no pun intended, but that's wicked. So when you first started, what was one of the main things you focused on honing?
Oh boy. Well, I wanted to know, you know, the great issue throughout my life is that I want to know everything as quickly as I can and jam all the information in my brain. So I don't know what I focused on first. I know I always loved tarot, and so I think tarot helped me link, like it helped me learn about the elements because of the suits and the cards and you know, all those visual cues that you get. And so I think that's probably one of the ways in which I started really absorbing it. And you know, it also links into astrology, and again goes back into the Kabbalah, which is something that the group that I worked with was really, really into. So yeah.
You know, it's funny. I was reading through one of Ted Andrews' books, and he mentioned the Kabbalah and you know the Hebrew practices, and whew, that's a lot. That's an old energy. When I finally came in touch with it, I was just like, yep, this is not for everybody.
No, it's not. Although the next book that I hope to write, I hope to make it more accessible for more people, because I have found that my study of Kabbalah has helped my study of tarot, and the two inform each other. And Kabbalah is, I believe at its heart, a universal system in that you can apply almost anything to that glyph of the spirit of life that's valid magically and find a spot for it. And you know, the Golden Dawn, which was a group from the late 19th century, they really were, Eliphas Levi was the first guy who recognized that the Hebrew letters fit the 22 major arcana cards in the tarot, and they kind of expanded on those ideas by bringing in astrology and other things, and so it could really be a whole system of learning. So that's something I'm going to call it the Illuminated Kabbalistic Tarot.
I like that.
So, or Illuminated Kabbalah Tarot, I'm not sure yet, but you know, really link it in together, because a lot of people are like, yuck, Kabbalah, I don't want to go anywhere near that. But I think if you can bring them in that way, I think they can find it really useful.
I think the mistake I made was I ran through the fence with full respect, but I did not realize how, I won't say how big the energy was, but it was just like, imagine you have like a bunch of friends who you haven't spoken to in forever, and you finally like show up back in town, and it's like, hey, it's like, that's a lot, okay.
Right.
Let me just back up and, you know, because even like within shamanism, you know, when we don't journey for a while, and then we go back into the spirit, there's a big meeting. Very big.
Where have you been?
You know, and what took so long?
Right.
But what's funny is, with all the years of studying shamanism that I have, when I started learning Wicca, so I went into shamanism when I was 8. And by the time I was 10, my uncle became my mentor. And then
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then I had different mentors that teach me through the years. When I came into Wicca, there were so many parallels. It's crazy, because I even looked into Druidism, and I'm like, they're first cousins.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think at their heart, a lot of these paths take from, again, places that are universal for humans, you know, regardless of where you came from or what your race is or whatever. And I think that's, I think our ancestors are trying to get us to recognize that and work with each other.
Right. I think that's one of the things that we definitely need to get a hold on. One of the biggest problems I've noticed, not to get political, but
go for it.
when it comes to different minorities, you know, everyone is focused on what their struggle is, and then within those minorities, those subgroups, everyone is focused on what they're worried about and what's going on with them. But it's like, if we listen to each other, if we come together, then we can make magic happen. That literally is what magic is. You take different elements, you put it together.
That's right, like a spell.
This is awesome.
Oh,
so
thank you.
For those watching, this was completely impromptu, no script. So when you started writing your book, one of the things I'm actually curious about was, how did you start? For people who've been in practice for a long time, who want to write a book of shadows or who want to start a book, where did you start?
Well, it's interesting you should ask, because this is really the culmination of many years of teaching Wicca 101 classes.
Love it.
And I always wanted to have a textbook that I could go back to and use. And so this is really kind of like the textbook that I always wanted. So I started with something that I think a lot of people miss, because if you go on TikTok and you go through Witch Talk, you're going to get a lot of information. Some of it might be right, some of it, maybe most of it probably is not, from what I've been hearing. I find TikTok overwhelming. Yeah, but so I wanted to kind of ground it in, well, this is what, Wicca is the name itself is very particular and refers to a very particular path. As started by Gerald Gardner, and after that a lot of other people were like, we dig this, we want to do it, and so it branched up, like I have in my picture in the book, of the many different paths that have evolved. That is page 14 in the book, and at the roots I've got all the ancient things. Like when I say ancient pagans, I'm talking about the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans and the Brits, and then Druids, and then people that learned it from their families, the hereditary witches, and I included powwow, which refers to Native American, but in Pennsylvania that also refers to a path that kind of combines Pennsylvania Dutch practices with Native American practices, and then the conjure people, that you have from the South, and then all of these other little branches that came in, and it just sort of, once Wicca kind of crossed the Atlantic Ocean, often through Raymond Buckland, who published what we call Uncle Bucky's Big Blue Book, which is the, Raymond Buckland's Complete Guide to Witchcraft or something.
And I have a copy of it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So that, once that happened, Wicca really started mutating, So anyway, I wanted to really give a sense of that history, because I think if you don't know it, a lot of people are like, well, I really don't care. But guess what? Your experience may not be as rich, I think anything that helps you kind of feel like, okay, there's a root to this, it started somewhere. And, Gardner claimed to be kind of going back to a practice in Great Britain that had been around for years, and a lot of people have disputed that, and at its heart, I don't know how much it matters.
Right.
It's because at their heart, this makes people crazy, but I say all religions were made up at some point. They all have a place somewhere. So yeah.
And I think that debate that a lot of people have, it goes back to people operate from a place of scarcity.
Yes.
And and they're staying in survival.
Yeah.
And like when I encounter new students or even customers that come through, I always ask them, okay, well, where are your ancestors from? What was the message that kept them alive? And that's not to put someone in a box, but it's like, let's start with a foundation.
Yeah,
let's know let's know what gave you the body you have, because the spiritual and supernatural, you did all that.
Right.
You don't know the physical. So what built the physical experience you had? What did they go through? What did they overcome? And then you add some. So I love that, I'm gonna go back to the page, I believe it's page 14.
Yes.
I love that you actually go down into like the grass, not only the grass roots, but the tree roots, and you also acknowledge, different ethnic backgrounds, because even though Gerald Gardner, he focused more, and I've also heard he focused on the British, I've heard he focused on the German, I've heard different ideas. I'm like, look, European ancestry, he dabbled. We can't forget the brawls. Like he studied and he pulled it all together.
Right.
I think what I encourage people to do is go at it with an open mind and let the well ancestors in, and then explore to all the others. Yeah. Because then you'll begin to have a healthy foundation to recognize, okay, this is right, this isn't right, versus this feels good. Because guess what? You can feel good until you got a cavity.
Right. Yeah.
So I really love that.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's something that I've also found that's really interesting is, and I think I touched on it in the book, is I also feel very strongly that, understanding what your roots are, from your background are important, but also to a degree, I think the gods also call whom they will.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, because I know a group of Norse pagans in West Philadelphia, you know, who don't look like the type of people you would expect to be, you know, they're black people practicing Norse magic. And I know a lot of white people that are very interested in Brujeria and in Santeria and voodoo and all of that. So actually Louisa Tish, voodoo priestess, told me that
I want to meet her one day.
Oh,
she is my heart.
I love her.
Oh my
I've
God.
met her 2 or 3 times.
So Louisa Tish, for those who might not know, is the grandmother of Orisha worship here in the States. Like, I'm geeking and gagged right now that you brought her up. I shouldn't be surprised. Oh my God.
She's really awesome. Yeah, she gave me a head reading because I wanted to know who ruled my head. And basically it comes out of Yoruba belief. Everybody talks about in Yoruba you have an outer head and an inner head. And your outer head is like, that's your face, that's how you present to the world. And then your inner head is the spiritual you. And so everybody comes into this life ruled by an Orisha. And she was like, oh, you're a rare bird. And I was like, well, no surprise. She said Olokun was the one that rules my head.
Gate la boca. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Okay, sis. Okay, sis. Oh my God.
That's so great.
So I never did, and not to cut you off, but I never, because of my initiation into shamanism, the way I went in, you know, within Santeria, Lukumi, Candomblé, and Ifa, there are sacrifices that are made when you do the whole ritual. So my practice, I'm not allowed to participate in that, not because it's bad or anything like that. That's just our culture.
Oh yeah, I get it. Because I was very interested in joining her house.
Yeah.
And she would, you know, she was like, no girl, you have to stay Wiccan. You know, so, but she was also, that's what her book Jambalaya is all about.
I have a mama copy of that too.
Yeah, it's a great book. And that's really about how can you, without having to, you know, commit yourself and do those sacrifices, still honor that. So I thank her for that a lot.
Because there's, you know, you have the Olorisha and then you have the Aborisha. So the Olorisha is someone who went through the entire initiation. And then you have the Aborisha, so the way I break down for clients that come through who are curious, I'm like, think of it as the Olorisha. So I'm from New York, we're both Yankees.
Yeah,
so,
we are.
So let's say we have cousins who grew up in South Carolina. They're the Olorisha. They're consistently with the Orisha, okay? We're the Aborisha. We're the ones that come down every other summer.
Right.
We'll be here for a couple of months, and then we go right back, you know, up north. So we'll be able to learn some of the magic, some of the stories, you know, do some of the magic, but we're not going to learn all of the secrets, okay?
Yeah.
But then we don't have the same level of responsibility.
Right.
But
that's an intense thing. And with Wicca, like our rituals generally, average Wiccan ritual is usually no longer than an hour depending on what you're doing. Whereas in, you know, one of these Ifa houses or what have you, you could be there a day, you could be there a day and a night, you could be there for 3 days. You know, and I frankly don't have that kind of stamina.
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
One of my favorite, I shouldn't say one of my favorite, one of the shamanic practitioners I love to listen to his lectures is Alberto Vidal.
I'm familiar.
He mentioned, you know, living in, like not only in the States, but in the industrial world that we live in.
Yeah.
Versus the medicine people who live the indigenous ways, you know, they may work 2 hours, you know, tilling the land, gathering food, making pottery, whatever their role was. And then the rest of that time is dedicated to the spiritual practice. Us, on the other hand, we aren't afforded that, you know, and I teach a lot of students, at least do 50-50, 50 mundane world, 50 spiritual. Yeah. Because you still got to go to work, you still got to pay rent.
That's right.
The spirits aren't going to do the stuff for you, especially when they know you are capable.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's the one thing I really impress upon people is meditation is foundational for everything. Yeah. And have a daily practice of some kind.
Yes.
So that you're saying thank you to all the people you need to say thank you to. And again, I always go back to meditation because that's what's going to give you that focus that you need to do. magic.
And it also, so like one of the things I teach my students is how to become aware, how to be able to track their own breath. You know, and then and then how to breathe correctly, for lack of a better term, because a lot of us, we breathe up here, so we're always pumping cortisone, we're always in survival mode, and I'm like, okay, learn to breathe in your gut without lifting your chest. You're like, what do you mean? I'm like, okay, so if you can't track your own breath, how are you supposed to track energy or move energy?
Right. Yeah, that's a big thing. Cool.
This has been amazing.
This is great. Thank you so much.
No problem. So I think we're going to wrap it up here, you guys.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to add about the book?
Oh, let's see. Please buy it.
Yes, you guys.
Yeah, please come buy it. They have many of them here, so it's only $17. And what else can I say? I have a website, artofhelenadomenic.com. You know, so you can look for me there. And I thank everybody for making me feel so welcome.
Oh, your family, you're adopted.
Oh, yay! We'll be friends forever.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Like we're getting up.
Yeah. All right.